Imagine a quiet man, observant, with a deep gaze. He doesn't need to say much to be noticed. His presence carries weight. It's not arrogance, it's not superiority. It's something subtler, more unsettling. He thinks too much, and that, believe me, can be frightening. Especially for those who aren't ready to see themselves reflected in the mirror of lucidity. Because sharp thinking doesn't just observe the world, it strips it bare. And some prefer a comforting lie over a disconcerting truth. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that few have the courage to touch: why intelligent men intimidate so many women. And we'll do that through the sharp, existential lens of Søren, Kierkegaard, the philosopher who believed that true love demands more than courage, it demands renunciation. But before you judge, stay with me until the end, because maybe, just maybe, the solitude you've been avoiding is the price of thinking differently. Maybe the silence you interpret as coldness is, in truth, the purest form of honesty. Kierkegaard lived this dilemma intensely. At the height of his youth, he gave up the love of his life, Regina Olsen, not out of a lack of love, but out of awareness. He knew that the intensity of his thinking, the depth of his doubts, and the anguish he carried would turn any relationship into a minefield. For him, truly loving someone also meant protecting them from himself. Have you ever thought about that? Loving so much that you walk away, not out of selfishness, but out of clarity? For knowing that your presence could become an unbearable burden to someone seeking lightness. Intelligence is intimidating because it destabilizes. In a world that values emotional comfort and predictability, overthinking is an act of rebellion. A man who questions everything, the meaning of life, social conventions, love itself, is rarely seen as the ideal partner. He is seen as too complex, too intense, too deep. And for many, that's synonymous with a problem, because where there is depth, there is instability. Where there is reflection, there is change. And a lot of people just want calm, even if it's shallow. Studies from the University of Texas showed that although women claim to admire intelligence, in intimate contexts, they tend to feel safer with men who offer emotional comfort rather than intellectual stimulation. Not because they don't value the mind, but because a mind that thinks too much can be a cruel mirror. It reveals contradictions that many prefer to ignore. And no one likes to feel exposed, even by someone who merely exists in silence. True, intelligence is not measured in diplomas. It's the kind that analyzes nuances, perceives silences, sees beyond words. And that's precisely what makes it so uncomfortable. A man like this doesn't enter a conversation to entertain. He enters to provoke. He doesn't offer ready answers, but uncomfortable questions. And even without meaning to, he ends up confronting others' certainties. Because his mere presence is a reminder that thinking hurts, but not thinking costs even more. Kierkegaard spoke of anguish as an inseparable part of existence. For him, truly living meant carrying that anguish with you. The intelligent man feels too much, thinks too much, perceives too much, and in that excess, he often chooses silence. But that silence, to those used to immediate validation, sounds like coldness, like judgment. Because silence is powerful, it reveals more about the one who hears it than about the one who practices it. It's the paradox of silence. The more you know, the less you need to speak. And the less you speak, the more others project their fears onto you. Often the intelligent man isn't rejected for who he is, but for what he seems to represent. Constant judgment, a light too bright in a dark room. And let's be honest, it's easier to turn off the light than to face the mess it reveals. Michel de Montaigne once said that authenticity is a social risk. Men who think too much don't know how to fake it. They can't take part in the superficialities that sustain most social interactions. They don't master the theatre of pleasantries. And because of that, they seem out of place, cold, even arrogant. But in reality, they're just trying to be consistent with what they feel. Because pretending takes a kind of energy they'd rather spend trying to understand the world. This is not about blaming women, it's about understanding the emotional mechanisms we all carry. The desire for safety, predictability, and stability is natural. And deeply reflective men, no matter how fascinating they are, don't offer that easily. They offer questions, not answers, doubts, not promises. And that demands emotional maturity. It requires a rare willingness to walk in the dark next to someone who refuses to pretend they know the way. Kierkegaard believed that true love was an ethical choice. It wasn't enough to feel, it was necessary to choose to love, even when that required sacrifice. And that's why he left. Not out of cowardice, but out of clarity. Because he knew that his presence would inevitably place the woman he loved in front of dilemmas she might not be ready to face. And there's nothing more loving than respecting the other's limit, even when it breaks your own heart. There's a tragic beauty in that, and also a freedom. Because the intelligent man, once he understands his own nature, stops seeking acceptance where only convenience exists. He chooses solitude not as punishment, but as integrity. He prefers honest silence over shallow company. He chooses solitary truth over easy applause, because he knows that the price of authenticity is high, but the cost of denying oneself is even higher. But something important must be said. This doesn't mean giving up on love. It just means choosing it more wisely. Saving your depth for someone who isn't afraid of it. For someone who looks into your eyes and doesn't look away. For someone who doesn't fear your questions, because they carry questions of their own. Because in the end, everyone is looking for someone who understands their silences, not just their words. The solitude of these men is not emptiness. It's space. Space to grow, to create, to reflect, to rebuild after each storm, and eventually to find someone who understands that loving a complex mind requires patience, courage, and surrender. It's not easy, but it's possible. And when it happens, it's transformative. It's the kind of love you don't see in movies. It's the kind built in shared silence, in knowing glances, in truths that don't need to be explained. If you've made it this far, maybe it's because you too carry that quiet intensity within you. Maybe you've felt at some point in life that thinking too much drove people away, that feeling too much made you seem dramatic, that your search for depth was mistaken for melancholy. But let me tell you, that's not a flaw. It's power. And true power doesn't need to show off. It just needs to be recognized and valued by those who aren't afraid of depth. So next time someone calls you complicated, smile. Because complicated, my friend, is living without thinking, without feeling, without diving in. And that, yes, that is truly frightening, because those who live on the surface don't drown, but they never dive either. And there's an entire universe waiting for those who dare to go beyond the foam. If this message resonated with you, like this video, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone else who thinks too much. And if you want to keep going on this journey, watch now the video Schopenhauer's Philosophy and the Pain of Thinking. See you next time. With more truths no one wants to hear, but you need to.